Welcome to our present state versus history on Speaker. Here we are focused on the current events of our culture through the principles of our history, trying to make sense of the culture and the mindset of today. I am your host, Ray Mayfield. Okay, folks, here we are back on the pod. We've been doing this little series on principles of freedom. I'm not sure the last podcast we did on the natural law that Cicero was based on, that I need to make sure I give credit where credit's due on a lot of these information gathering, I guess. None of this information is my own unique invention of my mind, I guess you could say. It is the compiling of years of studying and researching these matters, but a lot of my source information is a variety of places. But if you're serious about wanting to get into an actual study of constitutional format and framework, and one of the best resources that I've found is from the National Center of Constitutional Studies. They have a website, it's www.nccs.net. They've got some courses that you can buy or just take. One of them that we purchased years ago is called The Making of America, and it's a fabulous college course outline that they've put together with CDs of lectures, and I'll warn you, it's quite intense. It's several hours of studying. They have, this is where the book that I'm all the time telling people in this country that I believe should be mandatory reading in the high schools. It's called The 5,000 Year Leap. And a lot of these principles through that book, they have 28 principles that they've listed. I'm not going down through. I mean, these principles are all the same. They're universal. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm not going down their 28-point list. We probably won't have 28 points. But the points that are made in that 28-point list are the same points, if that makes sense. This study through these folks is what really, back in the early 2000s, 99, somewhere in there, got me interested in realizing that I didn't know anything about our Constitution and the forefathers and the way this country was put together in reality. I had an idea of some of the half-truths and misinformed information that the school put out that was just the basic generic surface, memorize a few dates and, a few things like, George Washington went across the Delaware, which, made absolutely no relevant impact on my life whatsoever. So through that revelation, I guess you could say, it drove me to realize that I needed to educate myself. And that's what began this quest of digging and studying. I've got many biographies by Walter, I don't know if I say his name right, Isaacson, I believe. He's written some biographies or bios on our forefathers that are fabulous, I think. Allison Sconson, I believe is how you pronounce his name, Maxfield. This Gordon S. Woods, who the National Center for Constitution quotes a lot of his writings. I've got a couple of his different books. One of them that I think is an absolute must read is Friends Divided, talking about the contrast differences between the opinions of two of our fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, and how those two men were actually pretty good friends, but there was a period of time there where they had quite a distinction between the two of them over their political viewpoints. Later in life, praise God, they, were kind of reconciled a lot of that before they both died. But it's fabulous to understand the staunch differences of opinion, but yet the ability to respect one another, which is something that I believe is foreign in our society today because of a lot of these things we're talking about that are just the conclusions of, a simple mind like myself that's drawn from digging into all this research and in the historical accounts. And what I hold dear, I guess, about most of these documents that I've read is they're not full of opinion. One of the things I like about this Gordon S. Woods and the way he writes is he's just taken the historical events and the way that they unfolded, putting them in kind of a story form so that it explains, without a lot of added commentary. Of course, he's put his 2 cents in and there, here and there, to make it flow together. But for the most part, it's just what I call raw information, and that's what I like. The Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, they're both out there where you can read. That's kind of hard reading, but it enlightens your ideas in your mind as to what the arguments were that the forefathers had about a great big federal government and the needs for federal governments and the places, the proper perspective, for the arguments about a federal government as well. And we're seeing these things. It's amazing. As you read these things, you see them unfolding in our current day newspapers. And this is the whole point of this podcast, is I'm trying to bring a relevance to the things that we have considered to be irrelevant to our daily life today. And it is exactly the same issues that they were dealing with back then, because the thing that we fail to grasp, I know I did, is the concept or understanding of the human nature that these men had a very good understanding of, and that never changes no matter what the date on the calendar is. Some other books is A Patriot's Guide is piled up of, I can't remember the author's names on that book off the top of my head, but it's compiled of papers of writings of the forefathers and quotes that they'd made and letters they'd wrote, speeches they'd gave. And We the People is another fabulous gathering together of that information. All of this information is public record, but these folks that I've just mentioned have done a fabulous job of compiling it all together and putting it in a single source, if you will, to make it easier to dig into it. And I think what I learned the most about in my studying was reading the biographies of these men and seeing a little bit about their personal lives and how they got to the place where they were creating our documents of liberty. And not only that, but seeing the different roads that they walked and the should I say the backgrounds that molded them into the men that they were. And then we also, through reading those things, get to see the tremendous price that those men paid. And I don't think we put enough emphasis a lot of times on the cost of bringing this country into existence upon the personal resources and recaps of those individuals and their greatest fears of what it was if this failed, because they knew if they put this Constitution and this country in motion and they went through the grievous process of bloodshed and the ripping away from the king, that they were going to be a target, if you will, from all nations of all sides, and that the path after the revolution from that moment forward was going to be hypercritical as to the success and failure of the nation, more so than winning the Revolutionary War. And these men understood that, and the greatest fear that they had when they were putting these things together almost 3 years before the Constitution was created and ratified and set in motion, the debates around the table were whether or not the society that they were living in around the colonies was going to have the capacity within itself to self-govern. See, the lack of self-restraint was the greatest fear they had as being the poison, if you will, that would prevent this nation from becoming what they knew it could be. because they had seen the decay. It wasn't something that they were just standing up on the street corners and looking around, being the judge of the society, saying, "Oh my God, these people are so unworthy." No, it wasn't anything like that. They were looking at the characteristics of Britain, of the king, of all of the wealthy nations, and what brought those demises into. And they were seeing those same characteristics develop in the colonies that were the most prosperous and where there was more prosperity of finance than we were seeing. They were seeing the behavior mirroring what was coming from the king. And they were afraid that we were just going to repeat those same things, and that was the debauchery, I guess, was some of the terminology they used, that was going to bring failure, if you will, to the break. And it was going to allow that corruption in prematurely to the point to where we could no longer operate it with the ability to self-govern. But before I get too far into that, we just did the last one on Cicero's natural law, and how Blackstone and these men believed that all law was based upon that natural law. Used the "thou shalt not kill" as an example, but and then this week my wife, she reads a article to me where this is what's going on in our current history. That's why I say I try to relate this stuff to. We've got legislators right now in Washington, D.C. that are passing bills. They passed a bill that said it was wrong or illegal to discriminate against black hairstyles. Now, what the heck is a black hairstyle in the first place? What's a white hairstyle? I mean, really? And are we really wasting time? Is this really what we've come to? This is exactly what the forefathers was talking about would start to happen if we did not base everything on the supreme law. We already have a law in the books. It says, thou shalt not discriminate against race, color, or creed, right? So I'm thinking that hairstyle thing probably falls under that. It's like here a while back in the state of Missouri, we had the big up-to-do, and we had to pass a law and put it on the books for the driving that, distracted driving with a cell phone, that's illegal, and we can write you a ticket now for distracted driving. It's nonsense. We've had a law on the books for as long as I've had a driver's license that says careless and imprudent driving. Therefore, anything that is declared by the peace officer that is careless and imprudent driving is what we call a CNI ticket. That CNI ticket holds as much weight as a DWI because it's careless and imprudent driving. If you're talking on the phone, if you're eating Doritos, if you're playing tiddlywinks underneath the seat while you're driving, all those things fall under careless and imprudent driving. Just like this black hairstyle, whatever that is. I mean, come on, really? Have we come to a place where we can't even rationalize right reason, which is exactly what Cicero is talking about? And I have to say, yep, when we got stuff like that, we got our legislators that are supposed to be taking care of the supreme laws of the land, taking care of our national security, taking care of our national trade. I mean, I can go on and on with that. Those are pretty important things, but yet we're occupied with worrying about whether somebody's making fun of somebody else's hair. Are you kidding me? This is exactly what Benjamin Franklin was concerned about, dealing with what they called public virtue. You see, Benjamin Franklin said that only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. He said, as a nation becomes corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Our society today is so vicious and corrupt that we need multiple masters. See, this is the point. We know we shouldn't be driving down the road looking in the back seat or looking at our phones or looking out the side window or looking somewhere other than where we are going. It is not rocket science. So do we have to pass a law that says I can write a ticket because you were looking crossways instead of straightways? See, we need more masters. The fact of the matter is, if we have public virtue, is what the founders called it, then we have right conduct.